Montana Territory, 1879. The wind clawed through the streets of Dry Creek like it had something to prove, kicking up dust and bitterness in equal measure. Quinlan Graves stepped off his horse, his boots hitting the ground like thunder that did not ask permission. He had been on the trail for 2 weeks, riding through snowmelt and silence, and the scars across his jaw and temple still pulled tight in the cold. Folks stared. They always did. But he had business here, and it was not their eyes he came for. He walked through the center of town, past the saloon where the piano had long gone silent, past the blacksmith whose hammer strikes had become more about warning than work. Dry Creek was not kind, and it had never pretended to be. The general store stood crooked at the end of the street, its windows smeared with grit. Before he could reach the steps, a voice snapped through the air. "You do not want to get mixed up in this, stranger." Quinlan turned. A man in a too-clean vest stood there, arms crossed. Behind him, 2 more leaned against a post, watching. "I am not here for you," Quinlan said, brushing past. Inside the store, he found her. Willa June Jasper stood with her hands clasped tight behind the counter, like she knew if she let go, she would swing. Her dress was worn but clean, her dark blonde hair pinned back in a way that tried to look neat and failed at the edges. Her eyes met his steady, tired, and not 1 ounce of fear in them. She looked at him the way no one had in years. "Can I help you?" she asked. "I need to speak with you." "Alone?" Willa's jaw tightened. "If this is about the debts, I am here to pay them." The silence that followed was sharp enough to draw blood. "You do not know what you are saying," she whispered. "I do," he said. "How much?" She hesitated, then said, 900. Quinlan nodded and took a folded leather pouch from his coat. He laid it on the counter. "It is all there." She stared at it like it might burn her. "You do not even know me," she said. "I know a town that feeds on the weak," Quinlan replied. "And I know what it is to be owned by something cruel." Her hand trembled as she reached for the pouch. "They will not let this go, even if the money is good." "They will," he said. "They already have." He turned and walked out. The man in the vest tried to stop him again, but Quinlan's eyes said everything his hands did not need to. The man backed off. By dusk, word had spread. Willa was free. The store was hers again, no longer tied to her late father's gambling debts, no longer bled dry by the men who had held her in place. Quinlan sat on the edge of town, under a cottonwood tree, chewing on nothing and watching the sky. She found him there. "You should not have done that," Willa said, breathless from the walk. "I did not do it for thanks." "Well, you are not getting any," she said, but then her voice softened. "But I am grateful," he nodded, staring at the horizon. "You going to tell me why?" she asked. Quinlan looked at her. "Because I know what it is like not to be able to breathe in your own life." She sat beside him. "The scars," she said quietly, "that happened in the war." "No," he said. "After my own mistake, fire got me." She reached out slow. He did not flinch when her fingers brushed lightly across the worst of it. "You do not hide them." "No point," he said. "They are part of me." "Not the part I saw first," she said. He looked at her then, really looked. Her dress was still frayed at the cuffs, her shoes scuffed. But her eyes were clear, strong. She was not scared of him, not even a little. "You have someone?" he asked. She shook her head. "Not since I was 16. Thought I did once. He left when the trouble came." "You have children?" Her breath hitched. "Yes, 2, a boy and a girl. They are at the edge of town right now, staying with a friend. I did not want them seeing me beg again." "You are not begging," he said. She gave him a look that was equal parts guarded and curious. "Why are you really here?" "I was passing through," he said. "Then I saw you trying to hold up a place that had already fallen. I have done that. It does not work." She nodded slowly. "You going to keep riding?" "I do not know," he said. "You want me to?" Willa looked down at her hands. "I do not know." After a long moment she said, "You want to meet them, the children?" He stood. "Yes, I would." They walked through the edge of town where lanterns were being lit one by one. At a small cabin behind the church, Willa knocked. A woman opened the door and smiled before stepping aside. 2 children rushed out, 1 boy, 1 girl. The girl was maybe 10, the boy a little younger. She bent to them, whispering something, then they looked at Quinlan. "This is Mr. Graves," she said. "He helped us." The girl stepped forward. "Thank you," she said firmly. Quinlan nodded. "You are welcome." The boy hugged Willa's leg, peering up at the stranger beside her. Quinlan crouched down and held out a hand. "You must be Samuel." The boy nodded. "This is your home now," Quinlan said. "No one is going to take it from you again." As they walked back, the children holding their mother's hands, Quinlan stayed close. The stars were out now, sharp and clear. Willa glanced at him, her eyes softer than before. "You really do not want anything in return?" she asked. "I did not say that," he said quietly. She stopped walking. "What do you want?" He looked at her, his voice low. "A place to rest, someone who sees more than the marks on my skin, someone who does not run." She did not speak right away. Then she reached forward and touched his arm. "You found her," she said, "but you will have to earn the rest." He smiled, slow and real. "I can do that." The sound of rain carried through the rafters before dawn broke, low and steady. Willa stood in front of the stove in the back room of the store, wrapping biscuits in a cloth while steam hissed from the kettle. The children were still asleep, curled together on the cot she'd dragged in last night. The store hadn't been meant to house them all, but it would do until she could make the cabin livable again. She heard the faint creak of boots on the porch before the knock. Quinlan stood there, his coat damp, hat in hand, hair darkened by the weather. "You're early," she said, stepping aside. "You said I'd have to earn it," he replied. "Figured I'd start with the roof." She passed him the cloth-wrapped bundle. "You'll want this then. It's still hot." He accepted it without a word, nodding as he glanced toward the children's sleeping forms. The quiet between them wasn't heavy, just unspoken understanding. She lingered by the doorway, watching him cross the yard. His movements were deliberate, not from age or injury, but from a man who didn't waste effort. She didn't know what kind of life had made him that way, only that it hadn't been an easy one. By mid-morning, the clouds had lifted, and Willa stood outside, sleeves rolled, pulling the weeds that had overtaken the garden bed behind the store. "You any good with hammers?" She looked up, shielding her eyes. Quinlan had stripped down to his shirt sleeves, nails between his teeth, a plank under one arm. "I can swing one," she said, "but not without splitting my thumb." He handed her a small saw instead. "Then you can trim the slats." "I'll call them down." She didn't argue. The work was steady and quiet. After a time, she spoke. "Why'd you leave Texas?" His saw slowed. "I didn't. It left me." She waited. "The land dried up. My brother lost his leg in a cattle drive gone wrong. I stayed to help until the bank took what was left. Then I rode." She nodded and went back to measuring the next slat. "What about their father?" he asked. She didn't lift her gaze. "He was a preacher's son, thought he could out-talk the world. When the debts came due, he disappeared." "I never saw him again." Quinlan didn't pry further. At midday, they sat in the shade of the shed, sharing a jar of pickled beans and a heel of bread. "You plan on staying through fall?" she asked. "I don't plan much anymore," he said. "But I've got no reason to leave. I've known a lot of men who say that and vanish by the first frost. I'm not one of them." She didn't challenge him on it. That night, she found him behind the store again, sharpening his knife by lantern light. "The cabin's dry now," he said without looking up. "I patched the hearth too, it'll hold." She sat on the stoop beside him. "I can't pay you," she said. "I'm not charging. I mean it. You're doing more than any man ever has. And not just for me." He finally looked over, the blade resting still across his knee. "Then why do you seem like you want to argue it?" "Because I don't know what you expect." "I expect nothing you haven't already given." Her voice softened. "Which is what?" "You listened. You let me stay." Willa turned her gaze toward the fields beyond the town. The moon was rising slow, painting the grass silver. "I don't trust easy," she said. "Not with the children, not with myself." "I'm not asking for everything," he said. "Just what you can give." She was quiet a long time. Then, without a word, Willa leaned her shoulder against his. He didn't move away. Inside the store, her daughter stirred in sleep but didn't wake. The wind shifted, carrying the scent of earth and cedar. Something in her chest eased then, like the first breath after a long-held silence. Quinlan's fingers rested lightly atop hers. No pressure, no demand, just presence. "I want to trust you," she said, barely above a whisper. "You can." And in the hush that followed, neither of them moved. The fire inside dwindled to embers, but they stayed there until the stars wheeled overhead and the world hushed around them. Not lovers yet, but something steady was building, something neither of them had dared hope for. Quinlan stood in the doorway of the cabin, holding a length of pine he'd just planed smooth. The late summer sun filtered through the cottonwoods, dappling the ground in gold and shadow. He watched Samuel crouched in the dirt nearby, focused on lining up pebbles in a row, tongue pressed to his top lip in concentration. Willa was inside, stitching a new hem into Anna's only good dress. The girl had grown 2 inches in the past season, and the sleeves had started to pinch. "You always that quiet?" Samuel asked without looking up. "No," Quinlan said. "Just learned most things don't need saying." The boy nodded like he understood, though he couldn't be more than 8. "You fight in a war," Quinlan set the pine board down. "No." "I was younger than most when it ended." Samuel finally looked up. "You got hurt in a fire, though. That's right." "You save anybody?" Quinlan crossed his arms. "No, just got myself out." Samuel studied his face a moment, then went back to his rocks. "Mama says people can change." "They can," Quinlan said. "She says just cause someone was afraid once don't mean they always will be." Quinlan crouched beside him. "Your mother's right." Samuel picked up a small stick and began tracing lines between the stones. "You gonna stay when the snow comes?" "I plan to." Samuel didn't answer, but Quinlan saw him nod just once. Inside, Willa tied off her thread and set the needle aside. She glanced up as Anna came in from the back door, cheeks flushed. "Miss Lottie said her cousin's coming up from Helena next week," Anna said, brushing dust from her skirt. "He's bringing books." Willa smiled. "If he has any worth keeping, we'll trade for them." "Quinlan could help carry them," Anna added. "He's strong." Willa's hands paused over the fabric. "He has plenty to do with the roof." Anna tilted her head. "You like him?" Willa looked at her daughter. "That's not a question children ask their mothers. I'm not a child." "You're 11, Willa said. Anna folded her arms. "You smile more when he's around." Willa didn't answer. Instead, she rose and carried the mended dress to the peg by the door. She stood there a moment, fingers brushing the fabric. That night, as the children read by lamplight, Willa stepped out onto the porch. Quinlan was leaning against the post, arms loose at his sides, eyes on the sky. "There's frost on the wind," she said. "I smelled it this morning." She stepped beside him, close enough their shoulders nearly touched. "There's a man in town asking after you," she said. Quinlan didn't turn. "What did he look like?" "Eastern coat, clean hands." "Didn't say much," he exhaled slowly. "Bank? I don't think so. He asked where you were staying." "And you told him?" I said I didn't know. Quinlan's jaw tightened. "Thank you. You want to tell me what that was about?" He looked at her then. "Someone from before." "There was land that wasn't mine and work that went bad. I left early." "Will he bring trouble?" "I don't think so, but if he does, I'll handle it." Willa nodded, then tilted her head toward the door. "Come inside." "It's warmer." He followed her in, brushing the dirt from his boots before crossing the threshold. The children looked up briefly from their pages, then returned to their stories. Willa poured water into a tin cup and set it on the table. "You'll need something more than bread if you're working the fences tomorrow." "I can bring down a deer," Quinlan said, "if you've got a good knife." "I've got better than that," she said. "I've got a grandmother's recipe for salt rub that'll bring tears to your eyes." He grinned just slightly. "Then I'll bring down 2. Anna glanced from one to the other. "Mama, can Quinlan come to Sunday gathering?" Willa blinked. "That's a ways off still." "But he should come," Samuel said. "He's part of us now." Quinlan looked at Willa, waiting. She met his eyes. "If you want to come, you can." "I'd like to." Later, after the children were asleep and the lamplight had faded low, Willa sat at the table, twisting a bit of thread between her fingers. Quinlan had stayed to help her move the crate of winter linens down from the loft, and now he stood by the door, hat in hand. "I can fix that broken latch on the shed tomorrow," he said. "You don't have to do all this." "I know." She stood slowly, hands resting against the edge of the table. "It's not just the work or the money, it's you." Quinlan didn't move. "I didn't think I'd want someone again," she said. "Not the way you live, quiet, steady. I didn't think I'd feel safe with that." He stepped forward only once. "Do you?" She nodded. "I do." He reached for her hand. "Then let me stay." She looked down at their joined fingers. "I want that." They stood there for a long time, the hush of the room wrapping around them like warmth. Outside, the wind rose through the trees, but inside, everything held still and certain. The next morning, when the sun rose pale behind the hills, Willa found him already out back, chopping wood for the winter that would come. She watched from the door, arms crossed, heart steady in her chest. He hadn't just paid her debts, he'd given her back her breath. The morning sun filtered through the high windows of the cabin, pale and stretched thin across the floorboards. Willa stood at the basin, sleeves rolled back, scrubbing the last of the soap from her arms. The chill in the air had deepened, and she'd started warming the wash water over the stove just to keep the children from shivering. Behind her, the door eased open on quiet hinges. "I traded for nails and oilcloth at the miller's," Quinlan said, setting down the small sack he carried. "They'll hold through snow." She turned, drying her hands on her apron. "That miller charge you fair?" He tried to double it. "I reminded him your ledger's clean now." Willa crossed the room and opened the sack, inspecting the contents. "You always calm when someone's trying to cheat you." "No," he said. "But I don't raise my voice when silence works better." She paused, then looked up. "Anna asked me if we're going to marry." Quinlan's expression didn't shift. "What did you tell her?" "That I didn't know yet." She studied him carefully. "What would you have said?" He stepped closer, voice low. "That I've been thinking about it since the second day." Her breath caught, but she didn't look away. "You don't even know if I can be a wife again." "You already are," he said. "Not by law maybe, but in every way that matters." Willa set the cloth aside. "If I say yes, you'll have to register the union in Helena. We'd need a witness." "I'll ride there next week." He hesitated. "Unless you want a church ceremony." "No," she said quickly. "No preacher, just the papers." He nodded. "Then I'll bring them." She reached for the sack of oilcloth, lifting it carefully. "We'll hang this over the loft window, keep the wind off the children." He took it from her hands. "Go sit." "I've got it." Willa stepped back, watching him climb the ladder with quiet efficiency. The sound of hammer tapping against wood echoed lightly, blending with the wind outside. That evening, after supper, Quinlan walked the perimeter of the property with Anna. She held a rusted lantern and pointed out the gaps in the fence he hadn't yet mended. "You think coyotes'll come through here?" she asked, crouching near a break in the slats. "They might," he said, "but I'll fix it before they do." She looked over at him, eyes sharp. "Mama never let anyone help with things like this before." Quinlan crouched beside her. "That because she didn't trust them or didn't want to owe them?" "She doesn't like owing," Anna said, "but she trusts you." He didn't answer, just rose and took the lantern from her. "Time to head back." Inside, Willa was brushing Samuel's hair by the hearth, her fingers gentle but unhurried. The boy leaned back against her, eyes half-lidded. "You keep doing that and he'll fall asleep sitting up," Quinlan said, hanging the lantern near the door. Willa smiled faintly. "He's been running since dawn. I expect he'll drop wherever he lands." Quinlan crouched to stoke the fire. "I'll finish the fence tomorrow." She rested her chin atop Samuel's head. "Then what?" "I'll clear the back field. That's where the soil's softest." Willa hesitated. "You planning to plant come spring?" "If I'm here when it comes." She stood slowly, lifting the boy in her arms and carrying him to the cot. When she returned, she met Quinlan's gaze without hesitation. "I want you here." He didn't speak immediately, just stepped forward and reached for her hand. "I'll stay," he said, "if you'll have me." "I already do." No ceremony had passed between them yet, no witness had signed a thing, but there was something settled in the air then, heavier than words and more certain than promises. Later, when the lanterns were dimmed and the children slept soundly, Willa sat beside Quinlan on the porch. The moon was low, casting long shadows across the yard. She leaned her head against his shoulder and he rested his hand over hers, warm and solid. "I used to think my life had already happened," she said. "That I'd missed my chance." "You didn't." "No," she whispered. "I didn't," he brushed his thumb across her knuckles. "When we sign those papers, I want Anna and Samuel there. They should see it." "They will," she said. "And they'll know it's real." Quinlan looked out at the starlit fields, and for the first time in years the quiet didn't press against him. It held him like the weight of a good coat, or the hush of a home finally found. The papers came back from Helena on a Thursday, folded inside a wax-sealed envelope carried by stagecoach. Willa took it from the driver's hand with her apron still damp from kneading dough, her fingers dusted with flour. She didn't open it right away, just stood on the porch, staring at her name inked in a stranger's hand, her breath shallow in her chest. She waited until the children were at their lessons with Miss Haddon at the schoolhouse, then brought the envelope inside. Quinlan was at the back table, repairing the leather of Samuel's boot with a steady hand and needle. He looked up when she stepped in. "They came," she said. He set the boot aside. "You want to read it now?" "I want to sign it." She laid the envelope on the table and carefully slit it open with the paring knife. There were 2 copies, just as promised. Willa ran her index finger down the page, noting the spaces for their names, the witness line, the date. "We'll need someone to sign with us," she said. Quinlan nodded. "Miss Haddon would do it." "She's fair," Willa agreed, "and she won't make a fuss." Quinlan ran a hand over his jaw. "You want to do it tomorrow?" She looked out the window. The leaves had started to turn near the riverbank, flashes of amber catching the light. "Yes, I'd like that." The next day they walked with the children to the schoolhouse after lessons let out. Miss Haddon stood by the door, brushing chalk from her skirt. She was in her middle years, with a blunt braid and a habit of watching everything. "We'd like your witness," Willa said without preamble, holding out the papers. The teacher lifted her eyebrows but took the document. "You don't want a preacher?" "We're doing it legal," Quinlan said. "Not ceremonial." Miss Haddon studied them a moment, then nodded. "I've got ink inside." They gathered around the desk in her classroom. Anna stood beside her mother, her spine straight, while Samuel leaned into Quinlan's side, eyes wide but quiet. Willa signed first. Her hand didn't shake. Quinlan followed, careful and deliberate. Then Miss Haddon dipped the pen again and wrote her name in crisp, teacher's cursive. "That's that," she said, setting the pen down. Willa folded the second copy and tucked it into her coat. "Thank you." On the walk back, Anna reached out and took Willa's hand. "Does this mean we're a family now?" Willa looked down at her, sunlight catching on the girl's pale hair. "We always were." That evening, Willa lit every lantern in the cabin, not for need but for warmth. She made stew with the last of the root vegetables, and served it with the cornbread she'd saved for the occasion. The 4 of them sat close around the table, knees brushing under the worn wood. After supper, Quinlan stepped outside and came back with something wrapped in a square of calico. He unwrapped it slowly and set the contents on the table, a small carved box, the surface smoothed by hand and time. "I made this," he said, "before I ever rode into Dry Creek. Thought I'd find someone one day." He opened it. Inside was a slim silver ring, plain but well polished. Willa didn't speak, only reached out and touched it with 2 fingers. "I know we've signed," Quinlan said, "but I want you to wear it." She lifted the ring from the box and slid it onto her finger. It fit. "I'll never take it off," she said. They put the children to bed early that night, Anna with her new book from Miss Lottie's cousin, and Samuel curled beneath the quilt Willa had pieced together from old shirts. Willa pressed a kiss to each of their foreheads, then stepped outside into the dark where Quinlan waited beside the porch. The air was cold enough that she could see her breath, but he didn't pull his coat tighter. He just held out his hand, and she took it without hesitation. They walked behind the store, down to the edge of the field where the frost hadn't yet taken the last of the wild asters. The pale blossoms caught the moonlight, bending gently in the breeze. "I used to think peace was something other people earned," Quinlan said. "Men who hadn't done what I'd done." Willa stepped closer, resting her head against his chest. "You've earned it. You didn't run from the bad. You walked into it and you stayed." His arms came around her, steady and sure. "You gave me a place to stop." They stood like that for a long time, the quiet between them full of everything they'd come through. Winter came early that year, with snow dusting the rooftops before November. But the cabin stayed warm. Willa taught Anna how to bind books using old flour sacks, and Quinlan built Samuel a sled from scrap timber and bent iron. They didn't talk about the past anymore, not because it hurt, but because they didn't need to. In the spring, Willa planted radishes and turnips in the back field, and Quinlan broke ground for a new shed. The children ran wild in the tall grass, chasing each other between rows of early corn. One night, Willa stood in the doorway of the cabin, watching the sun dip below the ridge. Quinlan came up behind her, his hands slipping easily around her waist. "You ever think about how far we've come?" she asked. "Every day." She turned in his arms. "You happy?" His answer didn't come in words. He kissed her slow, there in the doorway, as the wind stirred the prairie and the sky turned to fire. They lived there for many years, through hard winters and long summers, through births and losses, through quiet mornings and full tables. But always together, and they were happy. Truly, deeply happy. Because they had chosen each other through grit and grace, through silence and storm, and neither of them ever looked back.